this and just turn it over to council if you want to say anything.
Are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm doing a different one. It's only like an hour.
I didn't catch that.
It was a first one. It was funny.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Where are you doing that? I should have cropped it, sir.
Yeah, I looked at it before.
What is she doing?
This isn't all bad, I just pulled it. But I mean, that was after, like, I wanted to dig up in my max.
Well, you should have called me and told me to call the county.
I actually talked to him.
Indeed.
So I'll just.
Well, I'm gonna sit here for 4 hours.
Up to 72 hours for him to send you
Yeah.
Love that term.
information, so I gotta wait on that.
I'd like to bring our meeting to order this October 23rd, 2023. Tonight, our invocation will be provided by Councilman Ivory Craig.
Let us pray. Thank you, Father God, for bringing us here tonight and continuing to bless us. And please watch over us and continue to bless everyone here, council and mayor, with wisdom as we continue to proceed with difficult decisions. If you could, give us courage, wisdom, and togetherness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Next is set the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Mr. Moore, second by Ms. Polish. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion passes. We have 8 items on the consent agenda. Are there any questions? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Ms. Harris, second by Ms. Shoemaker. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Number 1, under new business, review and consider approval of the proposed art and locations associated with the TDA's B Art project. Paul Lowe.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. All right, cool. So this project is a partnership between us, the TDA, and the PAC. And the TDA is going to be funding this project. But why it's before you this evening is because the art that's going to be located on city property and on city property. So that would include the buildings at Tuck Park, on the Greenway itself, Arts on Greenway building, on the retaining wall along Central, on the dumpsters, enclosures, and on the sidewalks. So, and I can go through some of the art is in your packet, but just for the folks here as well. So basically, this project consists of 24 mini art B art projects. So that's going to be 8 of each medium. So first is Emily Anders, and she's going to be doing B art reliefs. And then Teresa Wrench is going to be doing mosaics. And these are just examples of what they're presenting or proposing. And then the last is murals from Cindy Durante and Treasy Trees. And also, so this is, and basically the locations and the art that's in this packet, and as you're seeing now, it's basically just going to be variations of what they're presenting here. So it's going to vary slightly, but it's basically going to be the same kind of type of art and same kind of theme. And this was approved, the locations and the art was approved by PAC at the September meeting. Staff recommends approval. I can answer any questions.
Does the council have any questions for Paul? Would you like to take action? Mr. Craig?
I make a motion to approve.
Second by Mr. Meadows. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion passes. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Next is consideration of request for a proposal RFP for Veterans Park expansion with downtown development. Marie Anders and Greg Beal.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Pull this up and start. You know, we were given direction to look at the RFP process for Veterans Park expansion. We did a very similar process for the redevelopment of 725 Elm Street, which OMB will be breaking ground first quarter of 2024 on. Actually have a meeting Friday scheduled with John Marino. This was a little bit different process in that the economic development statute at 158-7.1D was used. Really, when you look at that and the 160D-1312 statute, they're very similar in approach, but this one was very restrictive and it did not allow anything except commercial or industrial. So we had to fit everything in a box. We lost half of proposals that had a mixed-use multifamily component, but it all worked out great in the end. I mean, we got a tremendous project coming our way. It will probably be over $5 million investment, plus some other things happening as well in the community from OMB. 160D and how it differentiates, it talks about allowing housing construction or economic development of the community. I've put bold type to really look at the beautification of urban land, the provision of recreational opportunities, because this is a park potential expansion, as well as other components, and the guidance of urban development. So that statute, urban redevelopment law, it's a new statute that combined the old county statutes and the old city statutes into one easy-to-follow guide. Doing so under 160D, it talks about any local government is authorized to sell, exchange, or otherwise transfer real property. It's got to be a community development project area. It has private sale for residential, recreational, commercial. Industrial will not apply to here. Then you can place covenants, deed restrictions, and all that in some sort of development agreement. And that's really our city attorney's, subject right there, but this kind of gives you an overview of the statute itself, but going back and looking at the history, this is not something that was just decided a couple years ago. I think we've been very, a lot of emphasis has been placed on our downtown and preserving our downtown. In fact, this area was the Downtown Development Manual in 2005 that Satil and Satil had done to help preserve downtown. As the CVS pharmacy was going to come in, bulldoze half downtown, but it looked at creating a downtown gateway, and the Veterans Park area was recognized as being an important part of that. The 2008 vision plan said, hey, at least think about greenway through the site. Some commercial opportunities along the outer edge would be great. The linear park improvements was $1.3 million in voter-approved bonds, completed in 2012. So that's certainly expanded some investment on Central Avenue and Catawba Avenue. And then, of course, we went into the strategic vision plan update. Kimley Horn did a follow-up feasibility plan, and then McAdams did a plan that they presented at this year's retreat. And this is just to go back, and visuals, are worth 1,000 words, pictures are worth 1,000 words, so to speak, but this shows the 2008 vision plan. Greenway opportunity was really the only thing that talked about expanding on the 27 corridor and putting some protections in place, and the city accomplished that in 2009, 2010. This was in the strategic vision plan. It talks potential redevelopment opportunity on the corner of Hill Street and Catawba and Central and Highland, but it had the park expansion area, talked about potential redevelopment opportunities. We have a lot of suburban type development in our downtown with large parking areas up front. Typically you want the streets to front the sidewalks with the parking in the side or rear. So Kimley Horn had done this plan, and it excluded some properties that the city has already acquired. But what stood out to council, the mayor, and staff there were some high value properties that you would never get a return on the investment. You're buying apartments that are in the millions of dollars to put a parking area. There's probably a better way to address that. You're spending a lot of money for acquisition, and you let the private sector, once you do investments, you would allow the private sector to improve those. And you're already seeing it throughout our downtown. The concept plan talks, 3 multifamily buildings, some potential retail, but it has to the east of the creek that goes through the site. There is a blue water stream, park expansion and amphitheater on that concept plan that you saw at your retreat. So talk about public-private partnerships. It's defined as allowed in the general statutes under 143-128.1C. And it says that construction of a public facility or other improvements where the developer would fund 50% of the financing of the total cost of the project. So a lot of towns are doing these public-private partnerships where they don't have the funding to tackle the whole project themselves, and they do an RFP process, similar to what we did with OMB, and then they get a variety of proposals in place, but it certainly could work into the advantage in this situation. Case study in hand, Mills Market in downtown Cornelius. Cornelius has a very small downtown. It's very highway, interstate, commerce-driven town, but they want to invest in their downtown, and they need people living in their downtown to support some of the art stuff they're doing as well. So Mills Market, 238 multifamily apartments. They're doing 12,000 square feet of commercial, which their downtown certainly needs. It's on 2.3 acres of land, but they built a 500-car parking deck as part of this. And did not follow the RFP process, but it had two components that this would have, which would be conditional zoning and a development agreement. The town of Cornelius was in the need of a transformative project for their downtown. Town paid $24,000 per public parking space. In this example, it was much cheaper. It actually saved the town $1.5 million because they weren't having to clear the land and do the construction plans. The developer was taking all that on. You know, a project of that magnitude would generate $226,000, almost $227,000 just in property taxes if you did an apples to apples. Pindler project is a $73 million investment that we're seeing in our South Gateway. So that's 315 Class A apartments. They're pretty much built at this point, 3 buildings occupied. So this is the site plan for the Mills Market. You can see in the middle, very concise area for the parking deck. It's hidden by apartments and the retail and some amenity areas along the front. But that's their art center, the Kane Center in Cornelius. So going through the components, we have a very good set of bones, so to speak, from the OMB RFP. But some of the things you would want to define the project area. So when council defines whatever project area that is, we'll be ready to finalize the RFP. You certainly do a project overview. You go into some market summaries and market information that Better City, our consultants, have some data on that. What are the guiding public interests? There's plenty of public documents out there, strategic vision plan, all the stuff that are covered previously. Those would be the guiding documents for this. Evaluation criteria selection process. It just highlights the project transparency. I'm sure the biggest thing with OMB was to make sure it was a fair process. So we had a scoring system, and everything was black and white in that document. So people that submitted had a level of comfort. And then, you know, when proposals are due would be covered under that. Really from a private side, if they've done public-private partnerships would be included that. Their proposed development plan, because the private sector could get really creative with these things. So I think one of the main points was not to be prescriptive on what we want as a city, to allow the private sector to get creative with this. Because I mean, they could come up with some things we never even thought about before. We get calls all the time with people looking for downtown space, you know, for a variety of retail, restaurants, office space, and there's just nowhere to put them. You know, there is the acquisition piece, the earnest money deposit, and then the timing and the schedule's really important. Is this going to set vacant for 10 years, or are they ready to move? You know, the submission of qualifications will go with the letter of introduction and just really getting more information from their side on the development team. You know, experience, disclosures, do they have any conflicts of interest? We want to see all that, you know, make sure it's transparent, and that of course speaks to the issue of fairness. If everyone had a question, it's all in the disclosure forms. So, you know, once the notice of proceed is given, you know, based on feedback, 60 to 90 days would be good to put this together. We were very aggressive with the OMB, 725 Elm Street, and I think we did it in like 5 weeks. And we got 3 really solid proposals. We got some that we had to disqualify because they didn't meet the requirements. But 60 to 90 days would be appropriate for this type of project. you know, open the area for tours, and also, we had a review committee, a 5-person review committee. It was comprised of city staff, that we visited projects, and that was eye-opening to see what that company had actually done and was doing. And final decision could be made within 6 months of the release of the RFP. So, you know, we did a little quicker. I think with 725 Elm, it was probably 4 months, you know. This just shows you, you know, we unfortunately lost our GIS person, so we're not so great at map making right now. But this is a map that was made showing, you know, who owns the area over here, but mainly the city acquired properties here, and I think there's waiting on the closing here, but be happy to, and of course the plane mayor pointed out last time that it was called. But be happy to answer any questions you may have on the process or any correction.
Does council have any questions? Mr. Meadows?
So as we're working through this, one of the things that I'd like to get into the mix, you mentioned the 3 acres across the way, and identifying that while we don't have any control over that land, you know, it probably wouldn't be too far out of the realm of possibility to list that as an option and make them kind of aware that that is an additional opportunity to the project boundary that we're having. So with our state statutes and that, you know, we need to be clear that there's multiple paths that we could take. Some may have a high level of comfort in working through, you know, a redevelopment plan, others may not. It seems that you've already identified we have a couple of tools, the development agreement and options to buy those kinds of things to make sure this is an actual development and not just a land grab where I can, you know, do a few things to increase the value. We don't want to see that happen. We actually want to see something actually occur. So one of the things that I would also like to see staff explore now is when we did OMB, we did 2 things. We rezoned the property and we eliminated certain uses that we did not want to see there. I believe that staff to figure out what the best zoning to propose is and what uses might be screened out. I think that we as a group have agreed that from a consensus standpoint, we want active uses. We want people coming and going as best we can, and I think we've also agreed that I think I saw the Better City folks in here that rooftops are good for economic development downtown. So we may want to kind of lean towards a residential component that we didn't have the last time. Also saw in the material where we talked a little bit about some of our potential debt structures. I would eliminate those details.
Yeah.
The moment I say do X, that's what you're going to get. You know, if I leave it wide open, you don't know what they'll bring. And I've been surprised in the past at what they were planning to do for their development anyway, and what they were willing to finish and hand over. For example, a park-like structure for them would have been an amenity for a multifamily property anyway. And if they build it to a standard that we like and that we've set, then they can eliminate that maintenance cost, and it increases the value of their property when they go to sell it later on, which is the game they play. I'm looking at Sam, he's shaking his head. So those are the kinds of things I'd like to see us design into the RFP. Sure. In your financing, you need to spell out all of our tools.
Yeah.
The TIF we've talked about, which we haven't done before, but that is a possibility that we do have, you know, the potential of rearranging some debt and creating some capacity. Those are the kinds of things that I think they need to know that we're serious about kind of assisting where we can or if we need to. So that's kind of important as well. One of the things that staff has brought out in this process that I had not thought about, which I think is brilliant, is I would put parking in the mix. You know, having that called out as an option. Guys, we have a parking challenge in our downtown because we have a lot of businesses that are thriving. How would they tackle that? You know, it's not uncommon to have something called a Texas donut built where they, you know, surround a building with parking that you don't even know the parking is there. And they come park there, and that creates pedestrian traffic on your streets and would complement our historic area well. The other thing I'd like staff to look at through the rezoning, and I'm almost done, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I know a little something about this stuff.
I know, yeah, that's good. We don't want to
We
stop
currently have a
you.
3-story height restriction, and I don't think that if we were to allow something taller than that as long as you have the proper buffer between our current historic, you know, if you step that up, you could go probably as high as 5-story and not hurt anything. You could go from your 2, buffer it with a 3, and then go to a 4 or 5-story, and it wouldn't hurt anything. and could increase the intensity, which would increase the value of the property. And this is my last one. We need to think a little bit about how we want to word the ownership of the land. So I think one of the things that we've talked about doing is carving out the section that we have, which, if you'll go to the
Overall.
if you go to the overall picture that you had there, one of the things I kind of wanted to point out, but that one will work back up. Well, that one works too.
Yeah.
So if you'll take note where the park is located, it is on the bypass, which is very close to this building. So it kind of shifts our downtown center from only being Main Street to taking into consideration that the municipal complex over to the Methodist Church up to the Old Family Video Store becomes the triangle that has changed kind of what our central business district can be. And given that we tried to do something big and audacious with the parkland and the bonds didn't pass because people didn't want their taxes going up, I think that's what that question was about. It wasn't, do we want these amenities? It was, I don't want my taxes going up, I think was what they spoke on pretty clearly. This moves our center and becomes a focal point for our other economic development activities. Looking back at I'm seeing shaking heads, so apparently I'm getting close to the right ideas there. But so those are my feedback on kind of what we need to frame out a little more and provide a little more room and let the private sector folks know what we are willing to consider. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry that was long.
No, it's fine. Council, do you have questions, comments? Mr. Moore?
If we go back to the park here, I know that we changed some things, we took some stuff out. Can you talk about that a little bit as far as the,
Yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with cost. So you may not being too prescriptive. You talk about the project area, whatever it is, whatever it ends up to be, and say, the city would like, park amenities with the amphitheater and not get specific, like on 2.5 acres of land, and let the private sector really come through. But it was mainly cost from what I understand, because of the huge amount of expense because all of this, essentially, at least this whole corner, was the Veterans Park expansion. So you had like a 2,500 seat amphitheater and a splash pad and all that.
right?
And that just brought the cost up, but you could still get the amphitheater, the parking, the greenway, you got a nice little bridge here in this for a reduced cost. And like Councilman Meadows said, look, some of these RFPs have gone out, and the development community says, hey, we were going to build a park anyway, we'll build it for you. And that, there's no guarantee, but you've seen it time and time again in North Carolina under the public-private partnership statutes. And you could look at towns in the Charlotte region. So I think, to Councilman Moore's point, cost was an issue, and that's why the strategic vision plan actually says, really taking the foundation as the driver for the park bonds, but the park bonds did fail. But there was a lot of people that wanted these amenities, and it says get creative with funding options. That's in the vision plan. And so essentially that's following the vision plan by getting creative and not putting all this on the backs of taxpayers.
Well, and I agree with that. I just want us to be sure that that was our focal point from the beginning, was that park. And, that's going to be a draw. That will be a destination for our city. So I just want to make sure that whatever it takes to be creative to make all these amenities happen, we just need to work on that in any way we can.
Mr. Meadows?
So one thing on the project boundary, if you'll go back to that other slide, we need to make sure that the existing Veterans Park is also included in that boundary.
Yeah.
We don't want to
let's
limit what folks' vision might be. I don't know if you,
Yeah, we could show, I don't have, maybe that
that's close.
gets closer, but definitely with the exhibits and stuff, show.
Here again, with the creativity in the private sector, they might look at that Veterans Park area, and we've looked at some of the things there as negatives, and they might look at that drop and say, oh, I can put a climbing wall here.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that they come up with that we may not see or be interested in, and we don't know the current trends in the marketplace. But we need to make sure that boundary includes that area, because we do own that land.
Yeah,
One thing, Greg, just, this is right behind our historic downtown. And is there a way to suggest at least the material that's used, how it blends with the historic buildings that it's going to be butting up against? I think that'd be really important, that it blends there and we have that harmony in downtown.
Yes, and in the 2005 Downtown Development Manual calls for an all-brick product, which was extended to the gateway. And that's why Caramont built all brick, and that's why anything that comes in that district will be all brick. So there's things that are applicable in that overall district, but I think that's something that we've gotten feedback, and we could certainly be very specific that we want high-quality materials to match the historic downtown, all brick, cornices, parapets, all that fun stuff, so.
Mr. Meadows?
Just a general comment. I just want to say publicly that I have the full faith and confidence in our staff to carry out this RFP with the support of our legal team, with Ms. Anders involved and with Greg having experience in both of these areas. I think that they are more than capable of carrying this forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't think anybody's going to differ in that opinion. Is there anything you need from us other than this is information?
No, I think you provided good direction and good comments, and I've got them written down, so that will help. I mean, it's pretty much teed up right now at this point. It's just when council gives us the word to go, we go, so.
I don't know what you're waiting on.
No, oh, sorry. I mean, once you define the project area, that's when this RFP would be released, I think. And I think y'all are still working on what the actual project area, but these are good questions. Sorry about that.
It's all right, Mr. Meadows.
So I know we're accustomed to having an exact, here's the legal description, here's the exact boundary. In an RFP, you can dream, you can have a little vision, you can draw lines around stuff that doesn't belong to you, and they may go get it.
Yeah.
So it won't hurt anything. You just make it clear, here's what we own, here's what we control, because those are two different things, and we've got both of those things going on here. If anybody hadn't been paying attention, there's actually some property touching Central. It's a little different than what we've talked about before. So that's part of the process, is going through the process, because they may come in and have something in mind that we never even thought of as far as what to include in the project boundary, and you can adjust as you go. So I wouldn't let us having an exact, here's the exact acreage, here's, the four corners stopping you from going forward. And you attach the vision plan, you've already gotten permission from a lot of these property owners to say, hey, can I draw on your land? Can I vision what this might be or dream about what it might be? So you don't have to have specifics. I know you're accustomed to that, but you don't have to in an RFP.
Let's put it this way. When you're comfortable, maybe by November 13th,
Yeah. Hey, yeah.
then we'll be comfortable.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. Yeah.
Thank you. Great job, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, did you have anything to add?
I did not.
Okay.
That was Greg's presentation. He did a great job. I was just on hand to answer legal questions.
Okay, wonderful. Next, under old business, presentation on the environmental analysis for 131 South Main Street, Creech and Associates.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you,
And,
Council.
sorry, ECS.
Thank you.
Just to let you know, Brent Green is here from Creech, just in case you had questions for anything he could handle.
Okay, my name is Alex Sayre. I'm with ECS Southeast. We were contracted by Creech and Associates to conduct an environmental study on the subject property. I've been conducting this type of work for about 10 years, and these types of studies are very regulated. Asbestos surveys are conducted by a trained asbestos inspector, 90 days of experience. There's a lot that goes into our inspectors and our inspections. These are some of the regulations that are associated with an asbestos survey. For lead surveys, this is a commercial building, so we conducted a lead survey for a non-child occupied, non-target facility. And we generally conduct those surveys according to the HUD guidelines for evaluation and control of lead-based hazard and housing. It's not housing, but we go by those guidelines. Our mold surveys are conducted by an industrial hygienist or certified indoor environmental consultant. And there are no standards for molds, but there are basically guidelines that we conduct our work, EPA and other standard practices. A brief overview of the materials that we found. Most of the materials are vinyl floor tiles, floor materials, piping insulation materials for asbestos, and also we found trace asbestos in drywall and joint compound materials. And this is on I'll show you a site map in a second that shows where we collect these samples. Additionally, lead paint, we found lead-based paint and lead-containing paint on several surfaces, primarily in the older sections of the building, surfaces that are generally covered by new materials this time. And for our mold and indoor air quality survey, we found some elevated spore counts on the upper floor, which is an unconditioned space. Right now, there's no HVAC, or you've got old windows and a roof, and there's not really any conditioned space in the up on the top floor as well as in the basement. So here's where we collected our samples. You may notice that it looks like that we did not collect samples everywhere, but part of our survey is to identify similar materials throughout the building and collect samples according to EPA regulations. So these are the options for the construction cost. So these options are what you've discussed with Creech and Associates, with the demolition and abatement costs included in them. Very briefly, I think option one, so sectioning off areas of the first floor for renovation work. This includes demolition abatement of materials in the basement and second floor, MEP system replacement, and I guess, exterior components first floor remains as is, keeping the museum intact. Option two is to vacate the building and demolish and abate the interior as a gut, if you will, and then come back with replacing the entire MEP system. And option three is to vacate the building, and I guess the difference between option three and option two is the shell space on the basement. All the floors will be updated in option three instead of just shell space. So option A, B, and C are related directly with the hazardous materials that we discovered. So these costs are included as much as they could be in the construction costs for options 1, 2, and 3. So option A is to leave building as is. Option B is remediate the basement and the second floor. And option C is remediate the entire building. So quick pros and cons for option A. This option means that no abatement activities will be conducted. So the building will remain as is. It'll be used. The first floor will stay the way it is. Unconditioned spaces in the basement and the top floor. Now, with this being said, we recommend an asbestos and lead operations and maintenance plan to go with the building as it's being maintained, as things kind of degrade, if there are water intrusion issues, or just any sort of impact to the building that disturbs these regulated materials. We would have a plan and how to respond to that for asbestos, lead, and mold. With keeping these materials in the building, the cons are that it's an old building. These materials can deteriorate. As mentioned, water loss or any humidity issues may cause things to delaminate and may cause an exposure event. Now, if that were to happen, we would then be involved with the cleanup as well as the clearance. So every time you would have some sort of event, we would have to respond to it, and those plans would provide guidelines for that response. So option B, this is where the abatement activities would occur on the basement and the top floor. So essentially, you're sort of minimizing the risk of hazardous materials, but you still have to do both things. We'd recommend an operations and maintenance plan for asbestos and lead, mold and moisture plan, and the first floor, as it's not being touched, there would still be remaining asbestos-containing materials there. So while there's less risk, you are still you may still have to respond to potential water losses and that sort of thing in the future, which would include emergency response as well as clearances. And then option C would be the abatement of the entire building. So that means the museum is vacated for a period of time, and then the building is taken over by the contractor to abate all floors. This would require a project design as well as a lead removal plan and then air monitoring and clearance. However, these plans would be done in one go. You would do this, and then you wouldn't necessarily need the asbestos and lead plan going forward for operations and maintenance. Of course, the cons are that there's a certain amount of downtime during abatement, and then the cost, and of course, temporary storage of museum artifacts. So these are the response actions I mentioned. Asbestos and lead and mold apply to options A and B. Option C, it's really just a standard mold and moisture plan for any building. Water losses occur all the time, so it's a sort of a standard response. And these are the cost estimations associated with each option. For option A, it is sort of open-ended depending on what happens, if water losses occur with frequency that require an emergency response. The same sort of goes for option B as well, as you're still leaving the first floor intact and it still contains hazardous materials. And then option C, the cost is high on the front end, but you are removing these items and you don't have to plan to respond to them later, with the exception of the mold and moisture plan. A few just case studies. So the top example, that's a link you can follow if you'd like to see, but the top example is a case of an ongoing moisture problem in an apartment building where there was an ongoing leak and it wasn't repaired, but it was impacting a ceiling that had asbestos ceiling texture. And the tenant that was in the space, they were not responding within enough time, and over time, she lived there for a period of years, she developed lung cancer. So it's a lack of response to that sort of issue that can cause an exposure event. And Project 1 and Project 2 are projects that I worked on. So Project 1 was stabilization of lead at a former military facility that they were turning into a commercial space here in Charlotte. So the lead was stabilized and encapsulated so they could keep the aesthetics of that old facility. As the building was unconditioned, this caused the paint to delaminate with the encapsulant on it. So they had encapsulated everything, and it was actually causing it to peel off. So they had to go back through and blast the entire facility and take all the lead off, which basically the cost was essentially doing it twice, basically. That's just sometimes encapsulation is cheap on the front end, but it can cost you depending on how well it works in your facility. Project 2 is a manufacturing plant / warehouse. This warehouse is old and they just use it to store materials. They had several occasions we were called in to respond to a forklift driver running into one of the pipes and causing an exposure issue. This caused them to have to rope off the area. An emergency response action had to occur. They had to clean off the materials that were impacted, and then we had to run a clearance to make sure that they could go back to work. So we had to clean boxes, warehouse materials, the forklift itself, and this would happen several times. The cost to just abate the entire line at once would have been less than how long we did that response action for. So, and I believe that is all I have.
Okay. Does council have any questions? Mr. Meadows?
Just to make sure I understand, so in option A, if I have a standard plumbing leak and I've got to open the wall, which often happens in a plumbing leak, we're looking at a minimum of $3,800, am I reading that right?
So most likely that is touching some drywall that does contain asbestos. It's a possibility, yes.
So any HVAC, any plumbing, any electrical work that's behind the walls, we would have to bring out basically the hazmat crew each time that we touched it.
It would
if
be.
we don't do any abatement. That's
correct. So the just accessing that space would require you to need to abate it first. So, yes.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda is an update on the Facilities Committee for Old City Hall. Just to give a quick overview, a lot has occurred over the last 20 months since the topic was discussed at our council retreat on 2022. In the formal agreement between the Historical Society and the city, it states that we as a city has a responsibility to account for such donations and to provide a suitable repository for their protection and display. This is not about the Historical Society. The organization will continue regardless of location of museum. This is about what's best for the museum. Currently, our city's archives are being housed in the basement of a building contaminated with asbestos, mold, and no fire sprinkler protection. The Old City Hall Facility Committee was created, and they reviewed information from professional experts and architects regarding structural issues and hazardous materials. Additionally, the committee received a market analysis and toured the potential facility. Earlier this month, they unanimously made a recommendation to City Council to sell the Old City Hall property. Following that, the Historical Society Board requested a 30-day time period to raise money to purchase the building. The city's commercial real estate broker will be getting us a real estate appraisal and listing the property, but not before December 1st. This will provide the Historical Society approximately 50 days of fundraising opportunity. That would be from the original meeting, October 10th, is where the 50 days comes in. The property listing would be an upset bid process, which is a public process outlined by North Carolina General Statute 168-269. You have a handout at your seats with a complete timeline of events. You can also find this information under What's New in Mount Holly tab at the top of the page. As a reminder, our monthly work sessions do not include public comment, so that's just part of our normal schedule. So council, before you tonight is to decide about Old City Hall and selling it per the direction that we received and talked about. One thing was a concern I know was providing the Historical Society time to raise funds as they requested. So that was the reason we put December 1st, as no sooner would the listing come. We would have to defer to Sam Klein, who is our real estate expert. It could take longer than that to get it listed. Sam, do you have any idea? If you want to think about it, we can come back to that. But we don't want to list it before December 1st.
It's a question of the appraisal process. I think it's important. It's meeting court on Wednesday. It'll probably be another month before that appraisal comes out. And then put it in front of you. I mean, technically, as far as gathering data, putting marketing, listing it, that won't take you very long. But December 1st is probably the soonest based on.
But it could take longer, but no sooner than December 1st is kind of the idea. So there'll be an appraisal and a listing that comes along with it. Mr. Meadows?
Can we have our legal counsel outline how the upset bid process works?
Sure.
I'm happy to do that, thank you. I don't have the statute in front of me, but I can pull it up if there's more specific questions. Essentially, the way the upset bid process works is that it's a reactive process to an offer to purchase, and it is the typical default method for a property disposal for a local government, a municipality. The way that it works, if the municipality receives an offer to purchase a piece of real property that the municipality owns, then the city council may make a motion to accept the offer subject to the upset bid procedure. There's a required minimum earnest money deposit that's put up with the city clerk. And then I believe that the period of time is a 10-day period of time where anyone can put in an upset bid that has to be a certain percentage higher than the previous bid. It's fairly similar to a foreclosure upset bid process, if anyone is more familiar with that process. This upset bid process continues until there is a final high bid, and it stands for a 10-day period with no upset. At that point, the property can be sold pursuant to the upset bid procedure. At any time, the council can reject all offers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Ms. Harris?
So I wanted to ask Marie, so there's no way that we could put in there something about, the person that buys the building has to do history in the building?
Thank you for that question. I called the School of Government professor there to ask that question, not in context with the Historical Society, but fairly recently in another context. And the answer I received was that the upset bid procedure does not have in that statute any authority for the city to dictate the use that the buyer would put to the property. So in other words, it's important to remember that a local government like a municipality is limited in its authority to what the general statutes allow the municipality to do. So if this building was owned by an individual could potentially put restrictive covenants or things like that on the property that would dictate the uses that the buyer could put to the property, and could establish by contract, certain amount of control. A municipality, under the standard upset bid procedure, that statute does not give the municipality authority to control or dictate the use that the buyer puts to the property. That authority is simply not found in that statute. And when an authority is not placed in a statute, then the municipality does not have that authority. And I did confirm that by calling the School of Government.
So it's different from when we sold the annex.
Well, in what way? When we sold the annex, we did not dictate the use to which the property would be put.
I guess I'm talking about the parking lot.
Okay. So the School of Government confirmed that a city can dictate the compensation that it would wish to receive. For another, for one point, can dictate cash offers only. No financing would be considered, things of that nature. So can dictate the compensation to be received in the deal as a minimum. And then the upset bid procedure is to allow the opportunity for people to top that bid with a higher price or a higher amount of compensation that the city's looking for. In that procedure, it was an upset bid procedure, and this same statute we're discussing was used. The city did not attempt to dictate uses, but did have statements in there as to what compensation the city would accept, including a certain amount of parking spaces as a minimum number of parking spaces in the downtown district, which was defined. And so that was advertised, and there are multiple locations in the downtown that have parking. And so if a proper upset bid would include a higher amount of compensation than what we received, but it would have to have a minimum amount of downtown parking spaces, was the requirement for compensation.
Mr. Moore?
If this happens and we sell this building, we would, I think with the annex, we were able to put in the contract that if it were sold, the city would have the first choice. Did we do that with?
We did put a first right of, yes.
Yes. And could we do that with this building?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Meadows?
So this might be a little cart before the horse, but one of the things that I'm curious about is when we did the annex, the whole driver, at least for me, and considering that was control of the parking. This particular building has parking attached to it. Would it be possible for us to put the type of easement in place that gives us control of the parking the way we did for compensation with the annex?
If you're talking about the parking directly behind the old city hall, that was already included in the parking easement at the same time that the parking behind the annex in the Summey building, it's my understanding, my recollection, I drafted it, should be my understanding, it's my recollection that all of the parking was included into one comprehensive agreement, but I'll go back and confirm.
Mr.
So,
Meadows?
so regardless of who controls the building, the city controls the parking behind it, is what you just said.
That's my recollection, but I'd be happy to pull it out and confirm.
Okay. Does the council have any other questions? Council wish to make a motion? Mr. Craig?
To move forward with the sale and the process that we spoke about earlier.
So to outline that process would be, we would direct Sam Klein, the city would direct to contract with Sam Klein to get an appraisal and a listing no sooner than December 1st, and that, or later, but no sooner than December 1st. Is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Second by Ms. Shoemaker. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Opposed?
I just can't do it.
Okay. So it's 4-2. All right. Next on our agenda is closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3 and 5. I need a motion. Ms. Polish, second by Mr. Craig. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. We're in closed session.
Before we do that, can I say something? Am I allowed to say something?
We're not in
I-
session right now, so, yes.
I just want to say